I want to get into some of my journalism 101 questions.
Okay.
So how long have you been a journalist for?
Well, I was a member of the working press for 23 years as a police reporter, and I was a stringer for the New York Times for 11 years, and I was a stringer for Reuters for about 10 years. So I covered a lot of different stories, mostly crime, and then Tupac became my first book, but I was still free. I write for Psychology Today. I've been there 12, 13 years, and just write periodically. And Forbes, I was writing about once a week for Forbes, covering crime and that sort of thing.
How, as a journalist, how do you, especially as like a crime beat reporter, how do you develop sources?
Well, it's just like a City Hall reporter. You go to City Hall. I was a City Hall reporter for a very short time. You go to City Hall, you sit through the meetings. I would stop in at homicide. There are a lot of murders in Vegas. There's a lot of crime in Vegas, but I would, every morning, I had to be in the news. I was a morning. They had an afternoon police beat, and then I was a morning coverage, and I had to be there at 6. And so first thing I do is call the records department at Metro before any of the bosses are in, and it was all women, and they would answer the phone, and they all knew me, and I'd say, okay, what happened last night? What crime, what happened last night? So I'd a lot of times get crimes first, and they'd give me the details. Then I'd walk into homicide, I'd walk into the detective bureau downtown, and City Hall too, because things would overlap, and get police records. I did the old-fashioned way. I'd go to courthouse and get court records. But once you form a rapport with, I go to a lot of crime scenes, a lot of car accidents, because that was my beat too. So I'd go, and you're just standing around. Homicide, when someone is murdered, because I've been to more homicide scenes that I care to count, the body's not going anywhere, and so they take their time, and you get to know the detectives, you get to know the beat cops, you get to know, and pretty soon they start calling you and tipping you off on stuff. Also, my beat was the prison, which is, just 60 miles north of Vegas. So I would check in with the prison and find out what's going on then. So I would follow a case from the arrest to their stint and find out what's going on there too. So I kind of follow it full. So you get a whole lot of sources. So I was a clerk at Pacific Bell, and it was a good job. I was a single parent, and I always liked to write. I took creative writing classes at a junior college, but a newspaper came to town in Mission Beach, where I lived, and I had been writing a little silly column for this throwaway monthly that I didn't really call journalism, but you have to start somewhere. And this newspaper came to town, so I went to San Diego State University, and I bought the first edition of news writing and reporting, and gleaned through that because I did not know how to write an article. And so the Beach and Bay Press, we used to call it the Bitch and Bay Press. The Beach and Bay Press heard that I had written some columns for this little calendar and hired me. And my first crime story was on Mission Boulevard in Mission Beach. It was a DEA bust, and I went to it. I'm standing in the middle median because the street's cut off, and there are all these black jackets with FBI yellow letters and DEA on the back, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. And that's when I got hooked on crime. And Camp Pendleton was nearby, and that when you're a police reporter, you also covered the military. So I went to Somalia, I went to Saudi, Panama, with the Marines, covering them, and the paper shut down after 50 years. It folded, the Vista Press, and I was already stringing for the Associated Press in the San Diego bureau. Sally Busby, who ended up running the entire AP Association in Washington, D.C. I was so proud to work for her. And she taught me a lot. And I worked for AP as a stringer for about a year and a half. And I always say I faked my way into the news business. And then I started looking for full-time jobs, and there was an opening at the Las Vegas Sun for a police beat, morning shift and afternoon shift. And I got hired by them, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah, so when you write breaking stories, I can remember the New York Times calling me and asking me if I would cover a story for them, and I asked my editor, can I do 2 stories, one for them, and that's how that. So I ended up, and I was on the cover once of New York Times Magazine. So I was with the paper of record. I was very happy to be with them, and so one thing leads to another, and that's how. But I didn't have a journalism degree. I was 38 years old when I broke in, and I just say I faked my way into the news business, and it changed the trajectory of my life.
So with police sources, what's in it for a police source to tip you off about something? A detective calls you, what's in it for them? Why do they?
Well, probably pissed off at somebody, but I'm sure there's a motivation. Sometimes if they tip you off on something, you end up interviewing them and their name is in the paper. And some of them, what was it one guy told me one time? He said, don't believe any of these detectives. They go through those papers, they pull it out immediately. They want to see their name in print. But but I don't look at the motives of anybody. I'm just covering the story. So I don't really care what their motives were. But sometimes they're ticked off, they're pissed off inside and they don't like the way it's being handled. So they'll let a reporter know, and you get everything that's going on, and you end up, they're your source, and you go to other sources and you write the story. So they get to see a story that's being held back or something, they get to see that go in print. And, I made that happen, kind of thing.
Yeah, I have some local reporter contacts in Vegas now, and what's interesting is when this all started to unfold a couple of years ago, Detective Mogg, who was the detective that finally...
He wasn't there when I was, probably a beat cop when I was there.
He may have been, but he's retired now. So that's how much time has gone by.
It's been a long time. I was there in the 90s.
But I heard from reporters there that Mogg he did not like talking to the press. He was not a press friendly. He was not animosity, but just had no use for it. And he was I got the sense talking to Mogg that he's very by the book and serious about his business, and that's what he does. He does his job. Yeah,
and then sometimes they try to shut down reporters. My thing is, I love a challenge. You want to shut me down, I'm going someplace else. So I'll go, I'm going to get the story. Because sometimes they think if they don't tell you, you can't get it, which I think is what they thought about Tupac. Well, if we don't tell them anything, they're not going to get anything. I just go up, under, around, and you get people. I call those girls every morning at the desk. They're taking calls and stuff, and I got stories from them a lot. And cops would say to me, "How'd you get that story?" And I just smile, because you don't give up your sources.